Okay, so Matt, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Margaret. I guess I'll start by giving a little bit of background about the Lisner home. Some of you may be familiar with it, some of you may not. The Lisner home is on Western Avenue. As you're going east from Friendship Heights, uh, you pass like a stately mansion on the right that's set back from the road with a circular drive before you get to the Livingston Park. And that's the Lisner home. And many of you may have driven past it dozens of times, but there's no reason why you would know what it is. Its history is interesting. It's the same Lisners as the Lisner Auditorium at GW. In the late 1900s, Abraham Lisner owned a German Jewish immigrant owned the It department store in Washington called the Palais Royal. And it eventually became Woody's. And he married Laura, who was a glove clerk who worked on the floor of the department store and was Catholic. So it's a kind of Me Too moment in the 1900s. Laura then drove the family philanthropy, and in the 1930s had the idea that they should build a home for indigent white women from the District of Columbia. And so the home was built to serve, in effect, the kinds of people who Laura worked with on the floor of the department store who didn't marry the boss. Over the years, the board sued itself to lift the racial covenant and the gender covenant, and now it serves people of all races and genders, but still serves low-income DC seniors and has for 80 years. It serves people at a sort of spectrum of need for care. There's a nursing wing that has about 50 beds, again, that serves low-income seniors. There's the stately old building, which serves around 50 people and assisted living and independent living, and has for many years, all low-income DC seniors. We deliver 5-star care. The Medicare agencies that rate nursing homes always rate us at the top of the heap. And we're very proud of the fact that we delivered the best, highest quality, most humane care to people who are not the wealthiest people in the city. It's got a funky kind of vibe. The arts are really important at the Lisner home. And if you go in there, you'll see all the artwork on the walls that's created by the residents. And there was, a couple of years ago, the arts community of Washington, it's over on H Street, did a show of the art of the residents of the Lisner home. And it was a big to do. It was really wonderful. And there were many of the artists were people who had never gotten any recognition in their life and were getting this really magnificent recognition at the Arts Club of Washington. And it sort of captured what the home's about. A challenge that we face at the home is that we have to dig into our endowment to the tune of about $1 million a year. And that's not sustainable over the long term. So we have to figure out how to steady our ship. One way that we have steadied our ship is, for those who are familiar with it, you'll know that it's the Lisner Louise Dixon Hurt Shoemaker home. And all of those other homes are old historic homes in the district that serve different populations. One served the blind. The Louise home was founded by W.W. Corcoran, the Corcoran Museum, and the banker, who was a Southern sympathizer, who left Washington during the Civil War and moved to France and came back and created the Louise home for fallen women of the Confederacy. So, I mean, our history is at best a mixed bag, but today we're trying to do things that are really positive. So those homes that have all kind of folded up their tent and moved on to become non-operating foundations support us, but we still have to dig into our endowment to the tune of about $1 million a year. So we've been looking at what we could do to stabilize our ship. And then COVID happened. And then in the middle of COVID, a pipe burst in our 1940s building, essentially gutting the building. So we have different ideas for what we'll do on the campus over the long term, but first we have an urgent need to renovate our 1940s building where about 50 residents live, low-income DC seniors receiving assisted living care. And one of the things that we have thought about doing and are doing is an affordable housing project over the area where the parking lot is now, towards where, for those who are familiar with the site, where towards the Livingston Park. And we did an RFP process and we got a lot of developers to come forward and make proposals to us, and we've been evaluating those, and we've narrowed to one developer who we're trying to conclude a development agreement with. And our hope is to finalize an agreement with them and finalize a plan for an affordable housing project that would go on that site, that would serve all, it would be senior affordable housing. We're a senior community, all at least 50% or lower AMI. We're looking at a building that would be about the height of our existing building, not higher, but probably pretty close to the height of our existing building. Would have between 80 and 100 units, would match the style of our building, and would be set in a way to be maximally respectful to the neighbors. And then we hope to use the funds that we'll get for our land to build that building, to renovate our 1940s building, be back and get that work done. So if everything works as planned, we'll come forward with a proposal this fall. In response, the city is expected to issue an RFP for affordable housing projects. Some people say in September, some people say in October, with a due date in late in the year, early next year. We'll be in a position to apply for support for an affordable housing project in Upper Northwest. Really one of a kind. There isn't anything else like what we're proposing, or nothing on the table like what we're proposing. That we would secure that we win an award from the city, and that we would then borrow the money necessary to renovate our 1940s building. We have full plans in place now, so that we would start construction in the spring of next year to renovate our 1940s building. Get to closing on the affordable housing building a year later, and build the affordable housing building in the following year. So we would have 2 years of construction on our site, with the goal of having creating affordable housing options in the spectrum of nursing, assisted living, and independent living for about 200 seniors, the vast majority of whom would be low income. And right there on Wisconsin Avenue, right on the and Western Avenue, right on the edge of Friendship Heights. So far, we've gotten a lot of support. The city really wants to see affordable housing built in areas like the one that we're proposing. we haven't, our people have a really good relationship with the neighbors, and we've been telling the neighbors generally what we're planning all along. There's a lot of people like yourselves who want to see affordable housing built in Upper Northwest who stand ready to be supportive. But we have a we have a path we need to go down to get our proposal together, to get it approved, to not get sidetracked by community opposition, and to get it all done so that we can build on our campus serving low-income DC seniors on Western Avenue. So I think I'll stop there. I think I went 10 minutes and allow for more time for questions should there be questions. But does anybody have any questions they want to ask?
Thanks, Matt. So we're going to ask people to use the raised hand function, and Matt will call on you himself.
Okay. I see, Caitlin, it looks like your hand is raised. Oh, wait, no. Oh, there's a lot of raised hands. Are the white ones raised hands or the yellow ones? So I think the first one that I saw that was raised that was yellow was Reginald. Reginald, did you have a question?
Yes. So the so you saying you wanted to try to do 200 assisted living for seniors. How many units would that be? And what are some of the funding sources you intend to apply for? You intend to apply for from the district?
Right. So it would be 200 units overall on our campus. There would be 50 assisted living units, 50 nursing beds, and about 100 for independent living, affordable housing. And that would be a low-income housing tax credit deal with housing production trust fund support and investors through that federal program in low-income housing. Those are the main areas of support that we're looking for. And that's why when the city issues its RFP, a lot of people will be looking to try to use those same vehicles, and we want to be one of the ones that are chosen. Sandra?
Yeah, I'm still not clear on what's going to be in the new building. You've talked about 200 units overall, or 200 people overall. I mean, what is the new building and who will be eligible to live there?
The new building will be independent living, and it will be low-income seniors. They'll either have to be, there will be some 30% average median income, and some up to 50% of average median income. And there will be, well, we're not 100% sure, but there will be between 80 and 100 units, and that could be 100, 120 people.
And so how does that relate then to the rest of the property?
Well, I mean, we see it as creating a kind of spectrum of care on the campus. So from independent living to assisted living to nursing care, and maybe someday memory care. You know, you see this in a lot of places for senior living, where it's a place people can go, and no matter what happens with their needs, they can be accommodated on the campus. And that's a goal that we want to achieve, in this case for low-income seniors.
So currently, what populations are you serving? Are you expanding into a regular independent living, or do you already have some of that? I wasn't following that very well.
Yeah, so we have had some independent living in our building, but it was a small amount, and it was people who had very high medical needs but didn't qualify for what's called an EPD waiver. EPD waiver is something that happens under Medicaid that says if you had If you would otherwise qualify for nursing care, Medicaid will pay for assisted living care for you. And so the majority of the people in our 1940s building have been EPD waiver, qualifying for nursing care and receiving the highest quality assisted living care. There have been some independent living people inside of that building, but this will give us the opportunity to create much more independent living capacity.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question on that.
Sure.
How will you decide who gets to move in?
Well, I mean, there's a qualifying for affordable housing. We don't really control who moves into the independent living. There's a qualifying through the city for making affordable housing units available.
Wow.
Okay. Caitlin, is it your hand is, no, it's not. Okay, Karen.
Yes, you mentioned that you'd received proposals from a number of developers
Mhm.
and that you've selected one.
Right.
Could you reveal who that is?
Yeah, no.
Or,
Totally.
when can you reveal?
Yeah, so we don't want to reveal until we've negotiated a development agreement, and we expect to be able to conclude negotiating a development agreement by early October and be able to appear in front of our ANC with that development partner then. But I fear that we would lose leverage if we treated it as a fait accompli. And so thanks for the question, but I respectfully declined.
Okay.
Anything else?
And not from me.
Okay, Anne?
Two things. What ANC is it?
Say it again. ANC 3E.
3E?
Yeah.
And once you have all these tenants, is the city going to pay for the upkeep of the building and for the tenants, in effect, rent? How does that get taken care of?
Well, the city, we pay for the upkeep, or the partnership that does the affordable housing transaction does the upkeep of the building, and it's paid for out of the rent. Now the rents are subsidized to be so that people who are 50% or 30% of AMI can qualify for them, and you have to the debt on the construction of the building is much lower because of the support that the city and the federal government through these LIHTC investors give up front. But then we have to be a viable operating entity. We can't turn it into a market entity, and we have no intention of doing that. But we have to make it work on the rents that we'll receive, which will be regulated. One of the things in these kinds of deals is after 15 years, there's a right of first refusal where the nonprofit partner can purchase the building back for a small fee. And we are absolutely committed to exercising that right and keeping it affordable in perpetuity. Anything else, Anne?
No, thank you.
Okay. Robert?
Thank you, Matthew. It's going to be. My question is. Let me frame it.
Sure.
It's kind of. I guess it's going to kind of be. I don't know if it'll be easy to, I guess, share or not. But as we work toward trying to establish some kind of equity in housing, especially specifically when we're talking about the elderly and minority communities. I would like for the group to hear if you would be willing to share some of the covenants, because this is what we're working against. We're pushing back against precedents, basically. We're pushing back against history. And
Right.
unless we are currently aware of the things that we're pushing back against, we will never really have anything come to petition. Because you're coming to us, sharing with us what you're trying to do. I'm wondering, why can't we figure out who can live there already, or do some kind of surveys in the community? There's so many things going on in my mind. I'm glad that you're sharing, but I would like for you to speak to some of those specific covenants that you guys took off the books, for lack of better terminology, saying. And I also, my other question is, I'm wondering, what what minority developers, or who are you bringing to the table to actually to do the construction?
Right. So on the covenants, there was a covenant on our land, which we went to court to have lifted. Our population today is, I think, about 3/4 African American and nearly exclusively low income. And I wouldn't be surprised if that was the pattern for our population on the campus at the when we opened the new independent living building. You're right that the covenants throughout Upper Northwest are poison. I discovered, and I did a column in the Washington Post, there was a covenant on the house that I raised my children in. And I thought it was a thing that applied someplace else. I didn't think it was a thing in my house, but it sure was, and it was everywhere. And the displacement that people are very concerned about in many parts of the city happened 80 years ago in Upper Northwest, and we are contending with that history. When you look at what has happened in Upper Northwest, in the city demographically, what you see is radical changes everywhere. You know, areas of the city that went from being white to black and then black to white, and the but the one place that has not changed in 80 years is Upper Northwest. And you're 100% right that it's not going to change without an effort. We want to be a part of the effort to change Upper Northwest, but we're only a teeny part of it. It's much bigger than the Lisner home. But contending with that history is a real challenge. In our RFP process, we asked all of our companies to tell us about their women and minority-owned status, and that was an important criteria for us as we looked at different companies, both on minority and women. And like I said, I don't feel like I can say who we're working with now, but all I can say is that was an issue that mattered to us as we were looking at different companies.
Okay, because when we were campaigning around the Wardman, one of the things I found out William brought to the table was that the developers, Caramel, that won the Wardman, won the bidding, had the winning bid, they have a bad track record in California.
Is that right?
And so unless we sincerely and openly evaluate the people that we're bringing to the table, these kinds of developments ultimately end up benefiting the city more so than the people they're trying to help. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I was thinking, dang, I had the question that came back to me. It was the second follow up to the point. Okay, the developers can't release that. You can't tell us that. You understand that you really should share some of these the covenants, or at least expound on that more in your meetings. And the final thing was, I can't think of it. I'll put it in the chat though. I'll put it in the text when we come back to it.
Okay. All right. So I'm trying to think, Meg, I see your hand up, I think.
Right. I will turn off my video since that's often makes it unstable. What is to become of the residents in the 1940s building while you're renovating?
Yeah, so I mean our population, we stopped taking people in during COVID. We had some people who contracted COVID and who we lost early on. We were always ahead of the game in terms of our procedures, but I mean, every long-term care facility had some of that. So our population was pretty low. And then when the flooding happened, we were able to fit everyone in the places that were not damaged. So, and that's where those people are now. They're either in the nursing facility or they're in a wing of the old building that won't be touched. And so we will be able to maintain the population that we have today while we do the renovation. No one will be displaced. A challenge is that, you know, there's a need for places like ours, and there's a need for people who don't have long-term care insurance or lots of money, and we're not able to take in new people right now, or we occasionally we can, but mostly we can't. And we probably won't be able to, well, once we do the renovation of the 1940s building, we'll be in a position to take in a whole bunch of people, but that's a year and a half, 2 years away. And then when we finish the independent living facility, we'll be able to take in a lot more. That answer it?
Yeah, thank you. We are aware that low-income housing, that the criteria for the low-income housing tax credits require market rate housing. Have you seen the latest draft of the criteria, and are you in some ways exempt from that?
Yeah, I mean, our building is going to be exclusively affordable. And we have been assured that if we cross every I and dot every other T, we can qualify.
The criteria notwithstanding, that's good to hear.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to get too overconfident, but I think unless we face enormous and creative community opposition, that we should be able to succeed. The city has made building low-income housing in Upper Northwest a very high priority, and they have a very hard time finding places where they can get it done. And here we are offering an opportunity to do it on it, and foregoing the kind of profit maximization that might come from doing a market rate building. It takes a mission-driven organization to do that. You know, you can have churches and places like the Lisner home that can do that, or enormous subsidy coming in from the outside. But we offer an opportunity. So we feel like if we can get it all put together and win community support, we can make this happen. Carol, is other questions?
Hold on, Matthew, it came to me now.
Yeah.
This is what I want to put on your heart and your mind. I feel like this is a clairvoyant moment for me. Just speaking in favor. I'm a youth leader. I've just buried my father. I'm going to Georgia to bury my aunt. this coming Wednesday, and I lost another aunt last week,
Sorry.
2 to old age and 1 to this virus.
Yeah.
One of the problems that we have, I noticed you keep referencing the pushback from the community and opposition and how committed the city is to building affordable housing in Ward 3. And it makes me laugh on the inside, kind of. I chuckle because we were just campaigning toward the city to give us a 16-acre property, which would have brought more than enough affordable housing to this community, and they shoot us off and really didn't give us the due credit or attention that we needed at a critical time like this. So I take that with a grain of salt. I also feel like you guys, in moving forward with this development, one of the hanging points that's standing out to me now that I wanted to mention earlier, which led to questions about it being specifically senior living, and whatever rules and regulations you guys come up with, it should be some kind of equation that family members can stay with family members. I mean, to a certain extent, because I'm seeing old people dying on the streets, people in wheelchairs with nowhere to go. So we have a pandemic of elderly people dying on the streets, and everybody is looking the other way like it's just one person's fault. No, it's too many, it's too frequent for it to be these individuals' fault. And then if they get a housing, their grandbabies can't come stay with them because their parents might be on drugs or in jail or something like that. And so as long as we keep focusing on the development and providing the facilities, and then once we get development going, we need to understand that we need more revenue. So we're gonna have to change up the rules a little bit, but we're keeping African-American families divided, then a better and a more equitable city won't manifest.
All right, well, thank you for that point. I mean, one of the things that we need to work on the design of our building right now, and as we get ready to make a proposal. And one of the things, having a capacity for people to come and visit is an interesting thought. But let me carry that back. Thank you for the message. I think Carol, I don't think I've called on you yet, and I guess Karen, you might have something else. But Carol, did you have something?
I do have a question, and it sort of relates. I was wondering what kind of configuration the independent living places have. Are they like one bedroom with a full kitchen, or can you give us a description of kind of what people in independent living are living in?
Yeah, it's well, we have not pinned it down completely. So different people came with different kinds of proposals. The vast majority would be one bedroom. There is some people have suggested that there might be some 2 bedrooms. They would all have kitchens and baths and be fully ADA accessible and appropriate for seniors who may have mobility issues. But I think dominantly 1 bedroom, all with kitchens and baths.
Thank you.
Karen, did you have something?
Yes, thank you very much. What about people who are below 30% AMI? Do you have any place for them?
Yeah, I think there will be a certain number of units that will be for 30 and below.
Okay, because you mentioned 30 to 50.
Yeah, no higher than. There won't be anyone over 50% AMI in our building. And there will be some units that you can be no higher than 30% of AMI.
But some will be lower than 30.
That's right.
And how are you working out the percentages?
Well, in buildings like this, there is a certain a minimum that's required for 30% AMI in a building like this. There's also the voucher program, which we may serve voucher residents also which fit into that category. Who qualifies to get voucher residence and who doesn't? I mean, there's a lot of variables, but our goal, for 80 years, we've served low-income DC seniors, and that's what we want to do. I see Anne had a comment in the chat about the covenants being illegal for since 1960 or 70 or 60 or 70. Yes, the covenants were struck down by the Supreme Court in 1948. It took a while then to work them out of the system, but while they existed, and while lots of other policies around housing existed up through the New Deal, the die was cast so that we had a very segregated Upper Northwest, and people were pushed out and people were kept out. That's part of the history. But yes, it was struck down. They were struck down in 1948. I think there's still, Anne has her hand up, but I don't know if that's from before Robert, Reginald, and Gail. I don't know whether those are still up from before when you ask questions, but then if you have additional questions.
You have two Anns. I'm the second Ann.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, that's not a problem. Given that there are a variety of housing advocacy organizations represented on this call, and it's kind of early days as we find out about the Lisner, my question may be premature, but I wondered if you had given any thought to how you would like housing advocacy groups to help you in this project with the
Jesus
Lisner.
Christ.
Yeah, so we're going to want support from every corner that we can. We're a little bit, we think people are going to be for us. We think our neighbors are going to be accommodating. We think the ANC is going to be accommodating. And we actually want to start the process of reaching out to them. And the first people we'll go to with the details of what we're proposing will be those people. And we will hope that they will put wind at our backs and we'll be okay. So I don't want, we've had a number of people say that they're all for this and they want to get out there and do advocacy. There may be a time where that is critical, but for the moment, I want to be optimistic that we're going to get broad community support. And I don't want the people in the community to feel like they were backed into a corner. So you'll hear from us in October. We'll be rolling things out and you'll see if we're getting a lot of opposition, and you'll see whether or not it's a thing that you feel like you can enthusiastically support. If we're getting a lot of opposition and you think it's a thing that you can enthusiastically support, by all means help us. But first, we want to sit with our nearby neighbors and show them what we're thinking and explain to them why it is that we're doing it, and show how we've tried to be sensitive to what their concerns might be before we get an advocacy campaign going.
Thank you.
So I just want to say that we have only about 5 minutes left, and we have Reggie and Carol with their hands raised.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yes, I had some. One of them is how do you look to contract some of the assisted living services? Are you in conversations with different provider sponsors, and what's the conversation with like DC helping them about that?
Yeah, so on the assisted living, we do assisted living, and so we're not in conversations for that, but and we're very proud, and like I said before, we're a 5-star facility. We feel very good about this assisted living services that we provided, and we feel very protective of them. We would not want somebody else to do it because they wouldn't do it the same way we do, and we're proud of what we do. In the independent living facilities, there will be a building manager. There'll be a company that's the building manager, and we are part of the negotiation with the developers who's going to play that role. And it is very important to us that we have a building manager in the affordable housing, the independent living affordable housing building, that reflects the values that we apply in our assisted living and our nursing care. This is going to be on our campus. This is going to be a reflection on Lisner. And we want it to be a very special place that is very respectful of its residents. But you're right that that's a thing. You can make a mistake on that. You can let somebody just hire whoever they damn well please, and they don't meet what you were hoping for. And so we're very cognizant of the need to make sure that our management team reflects the values of Lisner.
Thank you. So you talked about the voucher system.
Yeah.
I don't know if you currently are housing residents with that system, but how do you look to identify seniors who may have a voucher?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in this area, but my understanding is that potential voucher residents are told of what their options are, and they can go and look and see if they can get a spot there. It's not us going out to them, it's them coming to us. So we would want to create an environment that it was an attractive environment for voucher residents to choose us. And it's kind of hard to imagine a better place for a senior. There's a park across the street in Montgomery County. There's a park next door at Livingston Park. There's the grounds around Lisner, which is really lovely. It's walking distance to every amenity you could want. I mean, it is a coveted place to live by all kinds of people, and we would expect that voucher residents would find it an attractive place to choose as well.
About the median family income levels. So
Yeah.
you said there would be people with 50 and less.
Yes.
So what minimum income requirements are going to be for do you see for those who are under 30%?
Yeah, I need to be a better position to answer that question. I'm not sure how that all works. The rent is fixed to the income level, and it's subsidized in order to make it work. And so I don't know exactly how it works, but the idea is to create housing for people at those income levels.
If I could just wedge in my question here, because I know you have a hard stop. Do you need any special zoning permissions like PUD or density or anything to do this development?
So it's a good question. We have an application in for a map amendment that's in front of the zoning commission. When we started thinking about this a long time ago, and during the comprehensive plan process, we asked for a change in the future land use map to allow for moderate density residential. We actually asked for moderate density residential and low density commercial. There had been people who said you should try to get medium density residential, which would get you up to higher heights than what we are thinking about. But we concluded that moderate density would achieve what we needed. We thought about low density commercial because we thought, maybe there's a store, maybe there's a restaurant on the campus. And so we wanted to make sure that would work. I think Phil Mendelson, on his own initiative, like combing through all of the different maps, looked at our site and said, low density commercial, why would there be any commercial a block and a half away from Wisconsin Avenue? And he, on his own initiative, took out the low density commercial, but I think that's okay because even the uses that I talked about are what are called incidental to the housing use, and we probably could have them if we needed it. So we have an application for a map that the future land use map was amended to allow for moderate density residential. And now we need to go through a process with the zoning commission to get that map amendment, to get the zoning map changed to reflect that use in the future land use map. We don't see that as controversial. We have an application in now. That'll be one of the things that there are hearings about in the fall. And I suppose that would be a place where opposition to our overall plan could arise, but we feel pretty good that that it should go through support. But yes, we have an application for zoning relief. We're not doing a PUD. Once we get the map amendment, we'll do a matter of right project under the new zoning requirements. It's possible that 5-10 years from now we would do more on our site, and we might have to ask for different zoning relief. But for now, we just need the map amendment, and then we're going to do a matter of right project over the parking lot.
Thank you.
Matthew, thank you so much for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks
There
for
was a lot of
what you're
interest
doing.
in your proposal, and we'll follow it with ongoing interest.
I appreciate that. Good for you for the stuff that you guys are doing. Thank you. All right. Talk to you later. I'm gonna
Thank
head off.
you.
Bye-bye.
Okay. So while we still have a good representation of both Ward 3 Housing Justice and the Wardman Hotel Strategy Team in the room, we're going to take advantage of that and have a conversation about possible ways that Ward 3 Housing Justice, the Wardman Hotel Strategy Team, and the new Northwest Opportunity Partners CDC could work together going forward. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to share my screen. Let me set that up.
Margaret, just a heads up, you're still recording too, which is fine, but I didn't know if you were specifically trying to just record the Matthew part.
No, everybody wanted to hear this part too.
Perfect.
This next part, if is that still okay with everybody? Okay. Okay, so let me get the So if we think about a shared goal, that a very general goal of creating affordable housing and building more economic justice in Ward 3 and in DC as a whole, all three of our groups have come together since January. Well, two of our groups have come together since January to work toward that goal. And now we're going to be feeling our way and figuring out how to work together with the Community Development Corporation that has spun off as a result of our efforts. So I'm going to run through a few of the things that we already know that we do and ways in which we think that we could create synergy to get more done and be more effective without necessarily having everybody in the world do everything. So let's see what that could look like. We already have on the grassroots side of the diagram, two organizations that have engaged in a lot of organizing, both by onboarding new members and doing our own team building, networking with experts and bringing them in to talk to us, with community engagement, particularly in Woodley Park, but also citywide around the issue of the Wardman, for example. These organizations have also engaged in a lot of advocacy, whether that be lobbying, city officials, both elected and not elected, testifying at a variety of hearings, writing and speaking for the press and the public, and taking direct action, like the action at the auction or the 4th of July parade. And we've also engaged in a lot of educational efforts internally for our own members and building our own knowledge base, and also externally with the wider community. And actually, that is a coming priority for at least Ward 3 housing justice on creating more understanding of affordable housing and disarming many of the myths that surround it. And then we've formed an incorporated nonprofit, the Northwest Partners Community Development Corporation. We're not a 501c3 yet, that's still pending, but we are an incorporated nonprofit, and we'll have some very definite activities that we'll do. One of the main ones, of course, will be raising funds from both private and public funding sources to enable any number of projects to be realized. We'll also work on negotiating. Okay, so something is wrong here. Negotiating deals. We want to be at the table when deals are struck for affordable housing in Ward 3 and around other areas as well where appropriate. We think that we can bring some resources to the table and convince deals to be a little more progressive and a little more inclusive than they often are. And we think that the CDC can do a lot of work in engaging community leadership. And by that, we want to be really clear that we're not just talking about community leadership of current community members in Ward 3, but also intending community residents who might be interested in moving to the various affordable housing communities that we would hope to create. And so that the pool of voices is wider when we're considering community leadership. And this could also be engaged around issues of legislation as well. So that leaves this whole area in the middle. And this is where we think the synergy lies. So let's say we think about ongoing education and capacity building. Instead of everybody doing their own, what we could do would be to pool our resources and our attention, because we can't all do everything, and say, organize a training on light tech, like we just heard about from Matt Fruman about these low-income housing tax credits. Does everybody really understand the ins and outs of those and other kinds of financing proposals? We could have training on housing policy, demographics, financing mechanisms, and then not just limit it even to these three organizations, but to open that up and share that with other organizations struggling with these same interests and needs across the district. We could hear from, going back to the idea of who are the leaders in the community, we could hear from folks with lived experience with housing insecurity and affordable housing, and learn from them how we could do better than what's currently being done. And that would be done all together, again, among those who choose to participate in those. We would also then together support specific projects, just like we did with the Wardman. The Wardman brought together everybody's organizing, everybody's advocacy, everybody's education focused on a specific project. The difference now would be that also the CDC would be involved and supporting that with funding, with negotiating the right kinds of deals that we really want on a specific project, and so on. And finally, our overall goal here together would be to build community awareness, support, and leadership for our new vision. What we're talking about is not the same old, with affordable housing, with IZ, with the trickle down policies. We're talking about something much bolder. And we really want to be clear about that and speak with one voice altogether. In a very specific example, we could think about, for example, how could we create synergy in this area? We mentioned that Ward 3 Housing Justice is interested in launching a broad community education campaign to dismantle some of the myths that exist around affordable housing and build understanding of the importance of affordable housing in the ward. That's a lot of work to do. But why couldn't the CDC contribute some funds once they have some? Of course, there's that. But why couldn't they contribute some funds to hire a consultant or someone to help craft that message, figure out how to disseminate that message? We wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel every time we wanted to do something. There could be some support for those kinds of efforts. Finally, I think it's important to realize that a lot of us for 8 months have been doing this side of things, the organizing, the advocacy, and the education on our own. We've been fully engaged, and we can continue to just function that way. But we'll have this overall coordination of shared educational opportunities, shared projects that we're all fully investing in, and shared responsibility and investment in building community awareness and support for what we're trying to accomplish in Ward 3 and hopefully in many other areas of the city as well once we find our feet. So at the moment, there are 5 board members in the newly formed CDC, Meg, Caitlin, William, Carol, and me. And we're all here today and would love to hear people's thoughts and questions about how this might work going forward. And what we'll ask you to do is a couple of things. We'll ask you to use the raised hand function in Zoom. We'll ask you to mute yourself if you're not the person questioning or talking to the whole group. And we'll ask you to be mindful of the fact that we only have about 25 minutes or so for this conversation. So to monitor your airtime. And if you have something really huge that we need to deal with in more detail, we can put that on a list of questions that we'll keep that we can go back to over time. So I hope that lays the groundwork for what it is we're trying to do. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we'll hear from the various questioners. Folks are encouraged to ask a question, and then we'll just pause and see which of the board members wants to step up to handle the question or the comment. So I see Anne and then Sandra. Anne Murphy.
I'm sorry, that must have been left over from last time. I'll lower my hand.
Okay, Anne, thanks. So I see Sandra and then Gail.
Well, I'll jump in. I have 2 things, and they're not really related particularly to each other. One of them has to do with, and Susan and Ann Murphy, Susan Lang and Ann Murphy and I have talked about this, is coming up with some sort of a protocol for onboarding new members to really encourage, somehow make it available to people to audit our meetings, to sit in on our meetings, and to see if they really be comfortable with our group. And I know that maybe means exposing us to people that may decide against us, but I think it's something we need to think about if we're going to be expanding our base. So that's one issue. The other is much more specific questions about what the CDC is going to be doing with respect to specific projects. Are we talking about actually funding buildings, actually buying land and building on land, or what does that mean? I'm not sure I understand.
This is Meg. I will turn off my video. Seems to work better that way. So I think we have to walk before we can run. And right now, we're not in the position to acquire land or lead deals. We're trying to figure out now some projects for which we can get funding, for which we can deliver, and use time to begin to really scout out what are the opportunities that are likely to emerge, because not everything is going to work out. So yes, I think eventually we definitely want to be in the business of partnering with those entities that have experience in actually producing housing. But even now we want to be knowing what they are, knowing who they are, and as Margaret indicated, pushing for a different model and being at the table. But initially, we're not in the business of acquiring land and developing projects. That will come in, we hope that will come in a couple of years.
What does being at the table then mean? I guess I'm not sure what that means.
I think it's going to take different forms with different people. And it's going to have to be built on relationships and trust. Because the advocacy that Ward 3 Housing Justice has been doing has been so potent, and we're building this movement, we bring to the table, all of us, an increasing knowledge and potency when it comes to being able to spread the word about something, help to gain some public support, appear at the zoning commission, whatever it might be. And so that's how we're going to gain enough credibility to become a partner with, to be seen as adding value to a project. And to me, that is how you get invited to the table, when you're actually bringing something that is additive.
Okay.
Thanks, Meg. And Sandra, I also noted your other question about onboarding, and I'm hoping that the onboarding and education team for Ward 3 Housing Justice can take that question on at our next committee meeting.
Okay.
Thanks. And next we have Gail.
I just wanted to ask a friendly question and looking for a blue sky answer. I see engaged community leadership on one side and advocacy on the other. And can those of you on the CDC talk a little about how the relationships with members of council and other government people will be coordinated? Just what's your vision? And if this is a duh, Gail, CDC is going to be talking about its own projects, and so I'm just curious about coordination in our relationships with government officials. That's all.
This is Carol. Let me think about that out loud a little bit with everybody. We have some limitations or we will have some limitations, assuming we get our 501c3 status, on the nature of, or the amount of lobbying that we can do. And it's either measured in time or money. But we can do some, and quite a lot of what you do that's considered lobbying is really education. So there's some of that. But I think one of the kind of nice pieces of the coordination of this is that we can be two different voices aligned, speaking to many of the same people with much of the same message and carry additional weight and a different sort of perspective that the corporation, the CDC, might have sort of more of a technical perspective, and the Ward 3 Housing Justice might have more of the community perspective or something along those lines, that, but with the same objectives in mind. So I think it's kind of exciting actually to have, in sort of the same way that the Wardman Strategy Team and Ward 3 Housing Justice coordinated, in having the same message and being two voices. I think it adds power.
Thank you.
This is William. I wanted to go back to Sandra's question of what it means to be at the table. And I think, part of it is we haven't figured it all out yet, so this is we're kind of figuring out how to do it. But I think from the Wardman example, when the project came through, we as a group, and many of you all, some of you all participated, we brought in outside developers to explain to us how a deal might be done. We brought in people who understand funding and financing and all of those kind of things. And we actually brought an architectural team to the table to render some concepts of how that project may look. And then we use those renderings when we spoke to council members, community members, and others to explain what we meant by saying bringing affordable housing to the Wardman. So in some ways, that's what being at the table is. You're actually bringing an idea, writing something up, and presenting it to community, to government officials to respond to, versus someone has a project, they present it to you and you're reacting. So I think that's part of what being at the table is, to try to come up with a infrastructure so that we're constantly looking at getting feedback, drafting things and bringing them to whoever the powers that be. And hopefully one day that will be us. And when I say us, I mean community members, because what we want to be able to do is to more formally represent the interests of our larger community that's interested in affordable housing and housing justice and equitable development. So I rambled, but that's kind of how you would be at the table, is to find the resources and bring the resources and try to make things happen versus being reactive.
Right, recognizing that we aren't likely to get pro bono architectural assistance every time we have an idea. If we had some money to hire somebody to give us that kind of assistance, then you've got extra resources. But I would add one more thing is coming back to some of the questions about the Lisner home. I think we need to be, both our groups need to be a voice for a different thinking about affordable housing. That whole extended family thing really sort of hits home with me. And I don't think, and then the mechanisms are very sort of siloed. And I think that's unhealthy, and we can bring that perspective as well.
Thanks, Carol. And now we have Robert. Robert, do you have a question you'd like to ask or a comment you'd like to make?
Oh, my bad. Okay, yeah. Sandra, what basically happened was a moment of synergy. People Power Action has been campaigning for a good while around housing in general. That's our correlation with Caitlin. And in our research, we found out about the Wardman. We ultimately met with the Ward 3 housing group, and from that formed the Ward 3 strategy group. Kind of. This is my correlation to this engagement. And what has happened is that we've actually realized that we do have some power because of the meetings that we've attained, the influence that we brought to the table, and we actually developed conversation to where council members are actually taking what we're talking about into consideration. We didn't get the ultimate end goal, but we're still working toward that narrative. So now that we're actualizing our power, it's kind of like, where do we go from here? And I feel like first and foremost, we have to be on the same accord about re-engaging, because we are neighbors at this point. Most of everybody on this phone call lives in Ward 3. So by us being neighbors, that's a block of voting power. That's a block of influence. I wanted to use, I'm trying to be light. So I wanted to say, like, what does a lady do before she goes out? She gets her face done. And so this is an organization, but it doesn't have any actual facial recognition. So I'm thinking that what Margaret had shared earlier is a vision board. I call that a vision board. And in the middle of the vision board, you can see an eye if you look at it sideways. You're always supposed to have fun. Fun's supposed to be in your eye. So what we're supposed to do is actually start our campaign around becoming known in the community. So like I was thinking about the list we had on the when we would take, we need to re-engage that list. All of those emails need to be recontacted, and we need to say, okay, well, this is where we are and this is where we're going, because that voice of vote still has yet not been material or actualized. So we should be focusing on that, and we should be focusing on engaging in the community. And sharing what we're trying to do. What I took from the call that I really heard was that he said we want to bring a building to the community. It's a senior living building, and we don't really want too much pushback from the community. And we're hoping that we're not going to get too much pushback from the community. And the city is on board with giving us money to build the building. But what is the moonshot idea? This is a pandemic. It can't be business as usual.
Could I respond to that briefly? Is that
Just,
okay?
just identify yourself, Sandra. I'm not sure if Robert can see you.
Yeah, this is Sandra Mills, Robert. I can tell you one of the things that's going to go on with an ANC in this area is a lot of discussion about the impact on existing homes, existing neighbors. And they have come up, and I thought about this as he was speaking. What they've done is they've come up with a pretty conservative plan, one that will, blend in with their existing buildings. That's not going to be a towering structure hovering over the neighborhood. And that has a cost. The cost is that there will be fewer units. They are not shooting for multifamily sort of units. So the proposal is a pretty conservative one. That said, I mean, they are an existing, nursing home, basically. And they are what they want to do is get something done so that they can support the rest of their activities. So yeah, it's not the biggest vision, but it is a very pragmatic approach. One, I think that he hopes to be able to get through the various levels of government review, within the next several months, and to be on the path to actually building the building. So, I mean, it's the kind of thing that we could support, but it's not the big vision. It's not really, the game changer for Ward 3. So that's what I thought I wanted to say back to Robert.
Thanks,
Right.
Sandra.
Right, I agree, Sandra. I can see you. I agree 100%. The point that I'm making, though, is that when somebody, because see, that's even us having this meeting and sharing with him is us actualizing what we formed. But if there's no creativity in it, then it's business as normal, meaning nothing changes. And so that should be our sticking point. Anytime we speak with somebody, they have to be emphasizing what they're doing new and creative, how they're trying to re-engage housing. Because if they're going by Mayor Bowser's method, then all we're gonna have is a bunch of shiny buildings, one bedroom apartment buildings. And to elderly people that family is estranged or whatever, they're gonna continue to die at the bus stops.
Well,
Okay.
I agree with you, Robert. I think this is arguably a somewhat different situation where you have a going enterprise trying to make up a deficit to cover its, it's red ink. And so, again, it's not the kind of thing that we would want, to see happening up in other places at Friendship Heights. We would want to see something bolder.
So I'm going to interject here for just a second. We are at our ending time, but we could continue for a few more minutes. But what I'd like to do, because I imagine some folks will need to drop off if they've only budgeted an hour and a half for this meeting in their schedule. I just want to remind everybody that our next meeting will be September 13th, and that we are switching to second and fourth Mondays of the month so that you can put it in your calendar and plan on it more simply than the way our old method. It's not really, it's going to be fewer meetings, not more. So with that, why don't we say we're going to continue for 10 or 15 more minutes for those who can stay? Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, and if folks need to drop off, just thanks very much for being here. And we have Margaret Lensler next.
Picking up on what Sandra was saying, there's no question but that developers love to build in Ward 3 because it's a rich community and they think they can get a lot of money for whatever they want to do. I think that it's incumbent upon us to become very familiar with all the plans that exist,